I can hear to play the melody,
Mm-hmm.
but my struggle right now is playing the songs because I hear harmony, but
Mm-hmm.
then I'm like, okay, where do I start? With inversions, keeping the melody on top. And I'm like, okay, and then what? So then I stop. And I'm like, okay, do I need to read PDFs? What do I need to do? So I need a jump start.
Okay, so first we always like to start from the bare minimum. Now, because the way I approach piano learning in this context is from more of an accompanimental perspective. That's what I teach. Most of the people here in the program have desires to accompany someone else, as in a singer or probably function in a band. So in other words, 90% of what you're playing is chords. So that's where I would start. First, figure out what are the chords of the song from the number system. 1, 6, 2, 5, whatever the progression of the song is. That's where you start, trying to get that part down first. Once you know the chords, then you can focus on what's the best inversion to play the song, right? Inversions are usually subjective, right? Some inversions might sound better than some, but in the end of the day, it doesn't really matter that much. However, I do recommend everybody start to play with some form of inversions. You definitely don't want to get into the habit of playing all your chords in root position, because then you have to spend some time on doing that. So right out the gate, start figuring out what's the best inversion to use. Oftentimes, you're going to hear the inversion that works best based on the song that you're trying to learn. You're going to be like, okay, this inversion sounds better because it sounds similar to what I've heard in the song. And that's generally how I pick inversions. The one that sounds closest to the song that I'm playing, I run with that. Okay. And then once you can play those chords comfortably to the song, then if you want to go add the melody, that's when now we're getting into solo piano territory. Because oftentimes, if there's a singer, we don't play the melody because that's what the singer's job is, to sing the melody. But if we're just playing at home or we're playing solo piano wherein there's no singer, then you can play the melody. So that's when I would focus on learning the melody. In other words, the melody should be the last thing you try to learn on the piano. You should know the melody up here from the get-go, but as it relates to now combining the melody and the chords, that would be like the last stage. First step, trying to learn the chords from the number system. If you need to write it down, you can write it down, for memorization's sake, but try to get that understanding down first. Then, once you know what chords you're playing, figure out what inversion you want to use. And then once you can play that comfortably to the song, because I always like to say the standard at which you can play the chords is, can you play along to the song? Once you can do that comfortably, then if you want to add the melody, then you can go ahead and work out the melody.
So I'm listening out thank you for that. I'm listening out for my weaknesses. I started, as I've given you some of my background, but with piano, all of these things come from because I've started in choirs as a child. I started singing and things like that, background and that. So I enjoyed the piano and many other instruments, but so now I'm like, okay, I know the melody and stuff like that and the harmony. So I'm like, okay, now as I hear you saying, I need to learn, what do I need to learn for the piano? And it's the chords, what I hear first, learn the chords and the fingering and things. But I think that's part of my weakness because I hear stuff and then I get distracted and I move and I run on. And so I don't know that you can help me with that.
Part of it is the discipline because, as you know, there are a lot of layers in music and levels. And if we get distracted by everything we hear, then we jump from the foundation. And we always have to approach everything we do in music like we're building a home.
Okay.
We can't decide we're going to start erecting structures and picking paint colors if the foundation ain't set yet, right? So we try to work on a foundation. So in this case, when we're learning a song, the foundation is to make sure that we know the chords from the number system, just the basic chords. What are the chord progression? If I say, tell me the chords for Amazing Grace, if you're learning Amazing Grace, You want to be able to spit out those chords. It starts on the 1, then it goes to the 4. Then you want to know it like that. So just spend some time learning that. Then we got to take this information from here and put it here. We got to know now the chords here. We're just focusing on chords. Now, the good thing is that you have a singing background. So learning melody and internalizing melody is probably something that comes a little easier for you. That is good because that's what's going to be your guide as you're trying to play through them chords. Use that melody as your guide so you know where you are in the song. But all you're focusing is on just the chords. Once you get the chords under your fingers, then you can start to explore the other things that you're hearing. Because the other things, the harmonies and these other melodies, those are like decorative stuff. They aren't needed to play the song, but they surely do make the song sound better. But if we just jump off the deep end and try to go there to all this other stuff we're hearing before we already got the chords down, then you're going to realize that it's also difficult to figure out those melodic lines because we don't know where that fit in the context of these chords that we don't really know yet. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
So we kind of have to put up some guardrails and say, I got to learn this foundational stuff first. Everything in music first is built on the chordal structure. And this is why in my song breakdown tutorials, I start with the beginner, then I go to intermediate, then I go to advanced. And that's because I want you guys to see, how do I get to the advanced with this crazy licks, chords, and stuff? Everything starts from here. And if you're able to trace the process, you can see even at the advanced level, I still have the core, what I call skeletal chords in there. I haven't gotten rid of them because I can't. The song is built on these chords. And then from these chords, I can start to add additional stuff, put on some muscles, some flesh, some decoration, Go ahead.
Does the PDF, because when I've gone through, I hear He is Lord. I understand. I hear it. And I'm like, okay, now what? So to look at this and say, does the PDF itself show me the chords that I need to play?
Yeah. So the PDF, if we're looking at what I call a cheat sheet, usually that's just the melody, the lyrics with the chords written over it. So we call that the cheat sheet because it just gives you the bare minimum, which is the chords. It doesn't tell you what inversion to play, and it doesn't tell you what licks and runs or any melodies to play over it. So it's just the basic cheat sheet. Now you can start from that. And then once you can do that, if you're like, okay, then what next? Then I would say, look at the intermediate version for some ideas. Because the intermediate version is going to add additional sevenths, but then it's also going to show you how to add rhythms. Right? And it's purely suggestions. So I'm giving you ideas. Some people like to learn it verbatim. Some people like to use it as a reference that they can then tweak to create their own. Whichever way works better for you, go with it. But that's how, because it's not just easy to just conjure up, where do I go next? If you've never done that before. So that's why I like to say, use the intermediates version as a reference. If there's an intermediate player playing the intermediate version of the song fairly comfortably and they're saying, what's next? I said, look at the advanced version as a reference that give you ideas as to where you can take it next. Yeah.
That's very helpful. And hopefully I'll get started again today.
Well,
thank you.
Keep me apprised of the process.